Well, I'm walking down the length of the reflecting pool right now to see if I can find exactly where this 300-foot slit is that Donald Trump claims is running down the middle of this pool. I have looked up and down this pool so far. I don't see any sign of any slit. I do see a lot of paint coming up, but no sign of a 300-foot long slit or lots of slits as he's been talking about. Again, shocker here. I'm sorry to report. What he's saying is 100% pure.
Hi again, everybody. It's now 5 o'clock in the East. In a surprise to probably no one, the dubious claim that Donald Trump made this week about a massive gash or slash in the lining of the reflecting pool does not seem to exist. But Donald Trump can't handle the truth that the company he hired in a no-bid contract to redo the coating of the pool did such a bad job that it fell apart. So instead, he has drummed up coverage and outrage over the week about vandalism. Vandalism, he says, happened, but provides no proof of happening. The entire debacle has so far cost at least $16.4 million, as well as changing the atmosphere around the reflecting pool. There are security cameras there now and a lot of law enforcement. But that cost, that price tag, is just a fraction of what Donald Trump plans to charge taxpayers, plans to spend to complete all of the vanity projects all over Washington, D.C. New York Times this morning in its newsletter put it like this: what has been made public about the cost of all the construction going on is, quote, about as clear as the algae-clouded water in the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool. So a group of New York Times reporters went out to get some answers. A detailed analysis finds this, quote, there will be significant taxpayer expense associated with all of Donald Trump's building and renovation initiatives. The 18 major construction projects Trump has undertaken during his second term come with a potential cost of more than $1 billion. There's the ballroom Trump is building on the spot where he tore down the historic East Wing. That is estimated to cost at least $400 million. There's a bunker planned for underneath the ballroom, along with more security enhancements. That comes to another $400 million. So $800 million total for destroying the East Room. Renovations to the Kennedy Center come in at $250 million. And there are many more projects Trump has talked about and waved posters around about all over the nation's capital. As to what the White House has to say about any of this, the Times reports this, quote, a White House spokesman declined to answer specific questions about the funding for many of the president's projects, but suggested that taxpayer money was likely to be used for most of them, and said that the continuing costs of the projects, such as repair, replacement, and maintenance, would fall to various agencies. The U.S. taxpayer picking up the tab when it comes to Donald Trump's obsession with his vanity projects is where we begin the hour with some of our favorite reporters and friends. New York Times White House correspondent Luke Broadwater is back. His byline is on that Times reporting we read from. Also joining us, Tommy Vitor. He's co-founder of Crooked Media and co-host of the political podcast Pod Save America and Pod Save the World. I want to start with you, Luke. This is such great reporting, such irrefutable evidence of Donald Trump doing what I think folks who've been covering him for longer than any of us say he has always done, which is to leave someone else with the tab or to leave his bills unpaid. In this case, with the ballroom, there's such copious public statements about how donors had paid for it and donors had chipped in. But the ballroom and the bunker seem to come to $800 million. I think that's the largest single item on your list. Explain.
Right. Yeah. Well, total items that we were able to tally up is over $1.2 billion and potential impact to the taxpayer. And I actually think that's only about half of it. It might even be a third of it. There are so many projects on the list where the White House wouldn't give us any information about the costs. So we just listed those as unclear. And some of those could be even more expensive than how much money the taxpayers are going to have to put up for the ballroom and all the security elements of it. And when you look at what Donald Trump has repeatedly said about the ballroom, he said that it would be 100% funded by his private donors. But many of those are secret donors. We don't know exactly who they are, how much they gave. But then if you talk to the Secret Service, they'll tell you that, well, actually, the taxpayers are, in fact, paying for the drone port and the hardening of the windows and all the security elements that are connected to the ballroom. So you can't just say, well, a private donor is paying for this section, but the taxpayer is paying for that. It's all commingled. And the idea that it was ever going to all be paid for through private donations is not accurate. He has promised that private donations would pay for other projects, including the Triumphal Arch. We know that taxpayer money is going to that project as well. He has said that perhaps private donations would pay for the fancy new golf course he wants to build down by the Potomac. We don't know what the potential impact of that is, but we've heard estimates that hundreds of millions of dollars will be spent down there. So again, we're seeing a spending spree on construction projects like no other president in history before has dedicated this much time and effort to building new projects that he fancies.
I mean, Luke, the problems seem to be magnified by the debacle at the reflecting pool, which is a relatively simple, I mean, you don't have to build a new building where a historic one stood. You don't need to erect a secure bunker underneath. You simply had to, Trump's aim at least was to make it, quote, American flag blue. And that was an absolute, the words that I want to use so I can't say on TV, that was an absolute debacle. And it was a combination of no big contracts, lies, sort of cheap approach to materials, it would seem. Then the remediation didn't seem to be up to snuff. It seemed to destroy and erode the materials placed in the reflecting pool to begin with. I mean, what sort of quality control? It's not just the amount of money that taxpayers will be out if these projects go forward. It's the quality of the work. If you take the reflecting pool as a microcosm of it, absolutely sucks.
It really is an illustrative example, right? It starts off with a promise of a very low amount of money, only $1.8 million, right, to do this big project. Turns out it's actually going to be more than $16 million, and costs may continue to rise. So there you have them estimating, one-tenth of the actual cost or so forth. Then you see, because of the rush nature of the project, they bypass all the normal reviews, right? This doesn't go before the Fine Arts Commission, which should analyze the color and whether the color is correct and any aesthetic changes. It doesn't go before other review panels. There's no outside experts who weigh in and say this should be done like this. Instead, it goes through a no-bid contract. There aren't competitive bids. We're not hearing from different contractors on how they would do it. And the rush nature leads to error after error. And we're seeing that with the algae, with the paint peeling up, with the bottom of the pool coming up. And then on top of that, then the president makes up claims, right, to cover up the embarrassment. Maybe vandals dumped all this fertilizer in the pool, and that's the cause of the algae. He says things that are obviously false to cover up for his own mistakes.
Tommy, I feel like I've been waiting 11 years for a Trump story that you could literally just walk up to and understand with your own eyes. You didn't have to believe. You could believe the press. You could not believe the press. We had nothing to do with it, right? And anyone who voted for Trump and thinks it's a nice idea that he's sprucing up the reflecting pool, I hadn't heard that it was in need of the kinds of things that he's doing to it. I think people in D.C. always welcome investment in the monuments. But you could walk up to it and you could see that it is the things Trump added to it that are floating on the surface, the cheap blue lining, because he's talked about it so much. It is, quote, American flag blue. It fell apart. It is what's floating. And then the lies and the cameras and the police state around it are all a result of the lies that Trump is telling about how it was destroyed. I mean, I feel like this is a story that sometimes people put at the end, right? We'll deal with the war, we'll deal with the economy, massive, huge stories with massive implications. But if we've been looking for 11 years of a story that shows how corrupt Trump is, how half-assed he is, how everything he touches literally turns to algae and falls apart, the lies that he tells to cover up the algae and the things that are falling apart, the story literally has everything.
Yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, look, put in a little money into D.C. to spruce it up for the 250th anniversary. Not the crazy idea, but $1.2 billion, that's so much money. And as a political matter, this is happening at a time when every single poll is Americans telling you they are furious about cost, they're furious about inflation, they don't trust Trump's handling of the economy, and they're just pissed at the world. And what they're reading about is the reflecting pool. And I get my first instinct when I hear about this stuff is I don't care. Can we, I want to talk about the disaster in Iran or whatever else. But then he forces us to care because he's doing press conference after press conference, showing us the size of the reflecting pool and then telling all these lies about the contract he got. Now we're arresting former Olympians for leaning down and maybe touching a piece of the pool that broke up and floated away. So it's insane. Now he's telling the story about one with a giant box cutter. The box cutter, initially the slash was 200 feet, then it was 300 feet, now it's 350 feet. So the lie is just growing and metastasizing. And it's just buddy, what are you doing here? Why are you so focused on this? I just don't understand. The $5 million to gild the statues, that's the one.
Let's step back for a moment, because everything we've just covered deserves to be seen whole. A reporter walked the length of the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool, looking for a 300-foot gash that the President of the United States described in vivid detail. He didn't find one. What he found instead was peeling paint, algae-clouded water, and a cheap blue lining breaking apart and floating to the surface. The same lining that was installed, without competitive bidding, without expert review, without oversight, on a project that began with an $1.8 million price tag and has already ballooned past $16 million with no ceiling in sight. And that pool is just one line item. The New York Times tallied it up. 18 major construction projects, a potential taxpayer bill exceeding $1.2 billion. And, as Luke Broadwater made clear, that figure may represent only a fraction of the true cost because the White House declined to provide figures for many of the projects. A ballroom built where the historic East Wing once stood, $400 million. A security bunker beneath it, another $400 million. Kennedy Center renovations, $250 million. A triumphal arch, a golf course along the Potomac, gilded statues, all of it, flowing from the public purse, while the administration maintains the fiction of private donor funding. This is the part that should stop us cold, not just the waste, not just the scale, but the pattern, a promise of private money, a no-bid contract, a rush job, a failure. And then, when the failure becomes visible, a lie. Vandals, he said. A man with a giant box cutter, he said. The slash was 200 feet, then 300, then 350, and growing. Meanwhile, a former Olympian was arrested for allegedly touching a piece of broken lining that had floated to the surface of a pool that the president's own contractor destroyed. There is something almost clarifying about this story, and that is exactly what Tommy Vietor was reaching for. For over a decade, critics of this president have had to navigate complexity, policy arguments, contested facts, media narratives that could be dismissed or spun. But this you can see with your own eyes. You can walk up to it. The thing that is floating in the water is the thing Trump put there. The lies being told are to cover for the failure of the work he commissioned. No intermediary required. And that raises the question I want to leave with you today. If this is what a $1.8 million pool project looks like, rushed, politicized, stripped of oversight, dressed up in false claims when it collapses, what should we expect from a $1.2 billion construction program reshaping the capital city of the United States? Who is accountable? And more fundamentally, whose city is this anyway? Because here is what I keep coming back to. Washington, D.C. does not belong to any president. Those monuments, that reflecting pool, that skyline, they belong to every American who has ever stood before them and felt something. The weight of history, the cost of freedom. The idea that this country, for all its contradictions, was built for more than one man's reflection. If you found this report insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real, fact-based news commentary.